Steffi, what's going on?
Hey, Jerry, what's up? First, thanks for having me on your show.
Well, sure.
Big fan.
Jerry Springer, who lasted for decades on TV with one of the most outrageous shows ever, has died of cancer at the age of 79.
When Jerry Springer died, he was remembered as the ringmaster of television's most violent circus. For 27 years, his name was a synonym for onstage chaos. But that was the persona. The real man, the serious political mind, was hidden. That Jerry character became his prison, forcing him to face his final, devastating health crisis completely and totally alone. Why did he choose this isolation? The answer wasn't in his TV show. It was forged in the fire of his first career, and a brutal public scandal that taught him one lifelong lesson: never ever show the world who you really are. The trauma that built the ringmaster. Long before the Jerry chants, Gerald Springer was a brilliant, ambitious political prodigy destined for national office. He was born, not in a hospital, but on a platform in the Highgate tube station in London on February 13th, 1944. His parents, Margot and Richard, were Polish Jews who had escaped Germany just a month before the borders closed at the outbreak of World War II. They arrived in America when Jerry was 5, settling in Queens, New York. This immigrant experience and the knowledge of what his family had fled instilled in him a deep, serious drive for public service. This passion propelled him to a law degree from Northwestern University and into the inner circle of Robert F. Kennedy's 1968 presidential campaign. After RFK's assassination, Springer moved to Cincinnati, where he became a partner at a prominent law firm and a vocal anti-war protester. He was a political rocket, spearheading the movement in Ohio to lower the voting age to 18. By 1971, at just 27, he was on the city council, and by 1977, he was the city's mayor. He was the golden boy, a charismatic liberal reformer. He wasn't just a figurehead, he was a populist hero who took on the city's biggest corporations. He was young, brilliant, and absolutely fearless. Time magazine had already named him as one of the country's 200 faces for the future, a man destined for national greatness. He was, for all intents and purposes, the perfect candidate, the living embodiment of the American dream his refugee parents had sought. But this is where the ticking time bomb of his career was set. His flawless public persona, his entire future, was inextricably tied to this image of moral purity. This created a powerful dynamic, but it also placed him on a pedestal so high, the fall would be total. While he was giving speeches on public morality behind the scenes, he was indulging in a secret that could unravel everything. In 1974, the bomb exploded. A police raid on a health club in neighboring Kentucky uncovered a list of clients. And on that list, investigators found 2 personal checks for $25 and $50. They were signed by Jerry Springer. He was 30 years old. He was caught. The 30-year-old rising star, the RFK protege, had paid for a prostitute. The press was relentless. An Inquirer article referenced a well-known Cincinnati political family. He was a laughingstock. The humiliation was total. This wasn't just a political misstep. It was a character assassination. He was no longer the brilliant RFK aide or the face for the future. He was now, in the public's mind, a punchline, a joke. He had to testify at the trial of the men operating the club, and then he was forced to resign from the city council in disgrace. He later told a reporter his work was my life, but he had committed a serious indiscretion. I guess I must pay for it now dearly. In political terms, he was dead. This is the moment that defines the rest of his life. This public execution, this trial by media, became his formative trauma. It forged a new rule in his mind. Never let the public see your weakness. Never let them know your secrets. Never lose control of your own story. In a move of pure desperation, he ran for his old council seat the very next year. He launched a shockingly candid TV ad, looking straight into the camera and admitting everything. 9 years ago, I spent time with a woman I shouldn't have, and I paid her with a check. I wish I hadn't done that, he said. And the truth is, I wish no one would ever know. It worked. He won his seat back. He had faced the humiliation head-on and taken back control. It was a lesson he would never forget. He later said his comeback became an obsession, I was determined to have you know that I was more than a check and a hooker on a one-night stand. This lesson would make him a millionaire, and it would, decades later, define his death. The Empire of Chaos and the Hidden Crisis. He had survived his public execution, but the 1974 scandal had put a permanent ceiling on his political life. He made a failed run for governor of Ohio in 1982, and his respectable career was over adrift. He found a new home in television, but it wasn't the show you're thinking of. He became a news anchor and managing editor for Cincinnati's NBC affiliate, WLWT, and he was good at it. He was serious, insightful, and his nightly commentaries were a local sensation. He took the struggling station from worst to first in the ratings and won 10 regional Emmys for his work. He was, for a moment, the respected public servant he was always meant to be. Then, in 1991, The Jerry Springer Show began. It started as a serious political talk show, just like his news commentaries. He hosted high-profile guests like Oliver North and Jesse Jackson. It was a colossal flop. Ratings were poor, and the show was on the verge of being canceled. Facing a second public failure, Springer and his new producer, Richard Dominic, made a desperate choice. Dominic, who took over in 1994, had a new philosophy. He reportedly told his producers to make the show interesting with the sound off. His famous motto, "If you want to save the whales, call Oprah. If you're dating a whale, call us." They abandoned highbrow politics and dived headfirst into lowbrow chaos. It was a conscious decision. Springer didn't just embrace the chaos, he weaponized it. The 1974 scandal had made him the trash, the public spectacle, the punchline. Now, he would be the one presiding over the trash. He would be the calm center, the ringmaster, not the clown. By putting other people's dysfunction on display, he ensured no one would ever focus on his again. The show wasn't just a pivot, it was an act of psychological warfare. The show exploded. This was his apex. He had turned his greatest humiliation, public exposure, into a multi-million-dollar empire. He was in total control. The show was called the most vile and grotesque freak show in television history. Critics blamed him for America's moral collapse. At its peak, the show was so controversial that cities and even entire countries tried to ban it. It was decried as the end of civilization, yet it was the most watched daytime show on Earth. The show beat Oprah in the ratings, and he was named one of Barbara Walters' 10 most fascinating people. His set became a cultural war zone, and his head of security, Steve Wilkos, became a co-star just from dragging guests apart. And at the end of every single episode, after an hour of chair-throwing and bleeped-out rage, this intellectual, this former mayor, would step forward for his final thought. A calm, liberal, often profound mini-sermon about morality and treating each other with respect. It was the most baffling contradiction on television, and the public couldn't get enough of it. But that final thought wasn't just a gimmick. It was the entire key to the man. It was the real Jerry, the serious, moral, political mind, speaking for 60 seconds from the cell of the 59-minute circus he had built for himself. It was the sound of the prisoner communicating with the outside world. He had to be the ringmaster to survive. But his final thought proved he was always, in his own mind, a prisoner of the chaos. He even survived a second sex scandal, facing it head-on, just like in 1974. But while the world was chanting his name, a dark, looming shadow was emerging, his fiercely guarded family. While platforming dysfunctional families, he was a devoted father to his daughter, Katie, who was born with spina bifida. He shielded her with an iron will. This was the ultimate firewall. The man who monetized public humiliation used his fortune to ensure his own family never suffered it. He was building a fortress of privacy. This was the hidden crisis. The man who built an empire on full disclosure was now living a private nightmare. Then, in his final year, a devastating diagnosis. Springer was told he had pancreatic cancer. It was aggressive, and the prognosis was bleak. The man who lived in the public spotlight was at his most vulnerable. But this time, scarred by the memory of 1974, he made a different choice. He told almost no one. He went into total lockdown. It's shocking to see how a life so public could hide a secret so devastating. Here on RetroFame, we're dedicated to uncovering the true, often hidden stories of the figures you thought you knew. If you believe these stories need to be told, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another deep dive. Now, for Jerry Springer, this reveal was just the beginning. The fallout was even more dramatic. The final wall of silence. The man who was a TV fixture for a quarter of a century suddenly found himself erased by his own design. The public had no idea. His final show, Judge Jerry, was canceled in March 2022. To the world, it was just a show ending. No one knew it was a life ending. He was, in essence, already a ghost. Then, just months before his death, he appeared on The Masked Singer as the Beetle. The public saw him as active and joking. It was a performance, think about that. A man who built an empire on unmasking everyone's secrets spent one of his last public moments hiding his own pain inside a giant, smiling costume. He was, quite literally, a prisoner of his persona. He was controlling the narrative, just as he did in 1975. He was putting on his uniform, standing stoically on set while living a private nightmare. This wasn't just about his privacy. It was about protecting his daughter, Katie. He had shielded her from the media circus her entire life and wasn't about to let his death become a spectacle. Many of his final thoughts were, in reality, quiet messages to her. He was a fiercely protective father who had built a fortress around his family, and he would not let the cameras breach it. This is where the story moves from ironic to tragic. His friend and former bodyguard, Steve Wilkos, was one of the few people who saw him near the end, but even he was kept in the dark. Wilkos, whose career was launched by Springer, saw him about a month before he passed. This was the man who had stood shoulder to shoulder with Jerry, the onstage enforcer who handled the physical chaos while Jerry handled the verbal chaos. Jerry was his mentor. The man Wilkos said had a bigger impact on his life than anyone other than his father. They met, they reminisced, they hugged. But Springer did not mention his cancer diagnosis. He didn't give his friend, his work family of decades, a chance to say goodbye properly. He just gave him a hug that Wilkos would later, with heartbreaking clarity, describe as a hug like he never hugged me before. He felt that Jerry might have been saying goodbye. This was the final devastating irony. The media firestorm wasn't a scandal. It was a wave of pure shock. On April 27, 2023, the headlines hit, "Jerry Springer dead at 79. The public's reaction was, "What?" There had been no warning. The family's official statement was cold, sterile. He had died after a brief illness. It was a shield. It was only after his death that the full truth was revealed. His family spokesman, Gene Galvin, confirmed the diagnosis was pancreatic cancer and that he had been sick for months. He had chosen to face it in complete privacy. The violent past he tried to bury wasn't the 1974 scandal. In the end, he buried his TV persona. The real Jerry Springer re-emerged to face death on his own terms. The 1974 scandal had taught him the pain of public humiliation. He spent the next 50 years mastering the media, building a career where he was the one in control. And in his final act, he used that mastery as his final weapon. He denied the circus. He denied the headlines. He protected his daughter and his family from the very world he had helped create. He refused to be the final guest on his own show. So how should we remember the man who was arguably the most famous and most infamous host in television history? We've seen his rise as a political star, his humiliating fall from a public scandal, and his shocking reinvention as the king of chaos. But we've also uncovered his final, hidden crisis. A tragic diagnosis he weathered in total silence, a direct response to the trauma of his first public humiliation. His story is a devastating cautionary tale about the true cost of fame. He was a politician destroyed by one secret, a TV host who built an empire exposing them, and, in the end, a private man who died guarding one final, tragic secret of his own. But what do you think? Was Jerry Springer's final act of privacy a way to protect his family? Or was it the ultimate rejection of the trash TV world he created? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love digging deeper than the headlines, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss another video. If you love this story, we've got more celebrity deep dives queued up for you. Just click the videos on your screen to continue. Thanks for watching.